The steering wheel spun uselessly in his hands. Julian screamed, a sound swallowed instantly by the roaring wind. As his sleek, black rental car slid sideways across the ice, the world tilted violently. Metal shrieked against rock, glass shattered, and then silence. Just the howling white void of the blizzard and the creeping numbness of freezing death. He closed his eyes, his breath hitching in his chest, waiting for the end. But the end didn't come. Instead, a rhythmic crunching broke the silence. He forced his heavy eyelids open to see a silhouette towering over his broken windshield. A horse and a woman, wrapped in wool and leather, looking down at him like he was the biggest fool on earth. The signal on the dashboard screen flickered and died, leaving Julian staring at a blank map, cursed under his breath, his fingers drumming anxiously against the leather steering wheel of the rented SUV. Outside, the world was rapidly disappearing. What had started as a scenic drive through the Colorado foothills to scout a location for the new Ecolodge project had turned into a battle against the elements. Chicago felt a million miles away. In Chicago, things made sense. In Chicago, roads were salted, meetings started on time, and coffee was always within reach. Here in the high country, the rules were different, and Julian was quickly realizing he didn't know how to play the game. The sky, which had been a crisp postcard blue only an hour ago, was now a bruising shade of charcoal. Snow wasn't falling. It was being driven horizontally, like millions of tiny white needles aimed specifically at his windshield. He adjusted the climate control, bumping the heat up to 80 degrees, but the chill seemed to radiate from the glass itself. He checked his watch. He was already late. The investors were expecting a preliminary report on the topography by Monday morning. Just a little further, he muttered to himself, squinting into the whiteout. The GPS said the pass was open. But the GPS didn't account for how quickly the Rockies could turn on a stranger. The road, a winding ribbon of asphalt carved into the side of the mountain, slick with a fresh layer of black ice hidden beneath the powder. Julian pressed the gas pedal slightly, to power through a drift, but the car didn't respond the way he expected. The rear end fishtailed. Panic, sharp and cold, spiked in his chest. He did exactly what he shouldn't have done. He slammed on the brakes. The heavy SUV became a sled. It slid silently, gracefully, towards the edge of the embankment. Time seemed to slow down. He saw the guardrail approaching a flimsy strip of metal that looked woefully inadequate against the drop beyond. He gripped the wheel, his knuckles white, his breath caught in his throat. The impact was louder than he expected. Metal crunched, the airbag deployed with a chemical dusty punch to the face, and the car tilted aggressively. It stopped, hanging, teetering. Julian didn't dare move. He could hear the wind howling outside, a mournful, hungry sound. He unbuckled his seatbelt with shaking hands, the silence of the cabin deafening after the crash. He tried the door, jammed against the snowbank. He tried the passenger side. It opened, but only halfway, blocked by a pine tree. He squeezed out, tumbling into the snow. It was up to his thighs instantly. The cold hit him like a physical blow, shocking the air from his lungs. He was wearing a wool pea coat and Italian leather boots, perfect for a Chicago winter, completely useless for a Colorado blizzard. He scrambled up the embankment to the road, gasping for air. "Hello," he shouted, but the wind tore the word from his mouth and scattered it into the gray void. There was nothing. No headlights, no houses, just trees, rock, and the relentless snow. He checked his phone. No service. A terrifying realization settled over him. No one knew exactly where he was. He had taken a shortcut suggested by an app. He shivered, his teeth beginning to chatter uncontrollably. He huddled against the side of the wrecked car, trying to find shelter from the biting wind. 5 minutes passed, then 10. His toes were beginning to burn, a precursor to not feeling them at all. He closed his eyes, his mind drifting to the warm boardroom he had left yesterday. He wondered if this was it, He would just become a statistic, a cautionary tale about city boys who didn't respect the mountain. He felt sleepy, which he knew was a bad sign. He let his head drop against his knees, and then he heard it. Not the wind. Something rhythmic, something heavy. Crunch, crunch, crunch. He forced his head up, wiping the ice from his eyelashes. Through the swirling white curtain, a shape emerged. It was massive, dark, and steaming. A horse, a large black quarter horse with a white blaze on its face, snorting clouds of steam into the frigid air. And on its back sat a figure. A woman. She wore a heavy canvas duster coat, a scarf wrapped around the lower half of her face, and a cowboy hat pulled low against the storm. She pulled on the reins, the horse stopping mere feet from where Julian was huddled. She looked down at the car, then at him. She pulled the scarf down. Her face was striking sharp cheekbones, skin tanned from wind and sun, and eyes the color of polished flint. She didn't look concerned, looked annoyed. "You realize," she shouted over the wind, her voice raspy and commanding, "that this pass has been closed since noon?" Julian stared at her, his brain struggling to process the question. The GPS. He stammered, his voice weak. "The GPS doesn't know the weather, and it definitely doesn't know this mountain," she said, shaking her head. She swung her leg over the saddle and dropped into the snow with a heavy thud. She moved with a practiced, efficient grace, walking over to him. She didn't offer a hand immediately. Instead, she looked him over, assessing him like she might assess a lame calf. "Can you walk?" she asked. "I think so," Julian said, trying to stand. His legs felt like jelly, shaking violently from the cold and the shock. He stumbled, and she caught him. Her grip was iron-strong. Through his coat, he could feel the strength in her arm. She wasn't just holding him, she was stabilizing him. "You're freezing," she stated flatly. "We need to get you moving. My truck is 3 miles back, but the drift is too deep to get it here. We'll have to ride." "Ride?" Julian looked at the horse. It looked enormous. I've never ridden a horse." She let out a short, sharp laugh that held no humor. "Well, today's your lucky day, city boy. It's either the horse or the hypothermia. Your choice." She didn't wait for an answer. She whistled, and the horse lowered its head slightly. "This is Banjo. He's gentle, mostly. Put your foot in the stirrup." Grab the horn. Pull. It was an undignified struggle. Julian, numb and clumsy, flailed against the side of the animal until the woman she hadn't told him her name yet practically shoved him upward. He landed hard in the saddle, felt precarious, high off the ground and shifting with the animal's breathing. She mounted behind him in a fluid motion, her chest against his back, her arms reaching around him to grab the reins. "Lean back," she ordered, "and try not to fall off. I'm not stopping to pick you up again." The journey was a blur of white and gray. Julian drifted in and out of awareness. The only thing tethering him to reality was the warmth radiating from the woman behind him and the steady, rocking gait of the horse. He could smell wet wool, leather, and something faint like sagebrush. "Stay with me." Her voice rumbled against his back. It was softer now, less abrasive. "Don't go to sleep." "I'm awake," he mumbled, though his eyelids felt like lead weights. "Where are we going?" "My place. The Double R, it's the only shelter for 10 miles. Time lost its meaning. Could have been 20 minutes or 2 hours when the horse finally stopped. Julian forced his eyes open to see the warm, inviting glow of yellow light spilling from a window. A cabino, a ranch house built of sturdy logs, stood defiantly against the storm. Smoke poured from a stone chimney, whisked away instantly by the gale. "We're here," she said. She slid off the back, then reached up and pulled him down. His legs gave out instantly, and he collapsed into the snow. She groaned, hauling him up. "Come on." One foot in front of the other. Inside, the sensory overload was intense. The wind stopped abruptly as the heavy oak door slammed shut. The air was warm and smelled of wood smoke and coffee. A large dog, some kind of shepherd mix, trotted up to sniff Julian's boots but didn't bark. "Sit," the woman commanded, pointing to a worn leather armchair by the massive stone fireplace. Julian collapsed into it. He watched as she moved around the room, shedding her heavy coat and hat. Without the bulky layers, she was smaller than she seemed on the horse, but no less formidable. She wore flannel and denim, her dark hair pulled back in a messy, practical braid. She knelt by the fire, stoking the embers until flames licked up the logs. "I'm Sierra," she said, not looking at him. "And you are lucky to be alive, Julian," he managed, his teeth finally stopping their chatter as the heat soaked into his bones. "Thank you. You saved my life." Sierra stood up, brushing ash from her hands. She looked at him, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Yeah, well, I don't make a habit of it. I've got enough strays to take care of." She walked into the kitchen area. "I'm making soup. Try to thaw out without setting yourself on fire." Julian looked around the room. It was rustic but beautiful. Hand-hewn beams, Navajo rugs, shelves lined with books that looked well read. It was a home, not a showpiece. It was everything his glass and steel apartment in Chicago was not. The storm raged for 3 days. The roads were buried under 4 feet of snow, and the power lines were down, or cut off from the world. For the first 24 hours, Julian was useless. He slept, ate the stew, Sierra pushed in front of him, and slept again. But by the second day, the restlessness of the city began to itch beneath his skin. He paced the small living room, checking his phone every 10 minutes for a signal that wasn't there. Sierra watched him with amusement as she oiled a bridle at the kitchen table. "You're going to wear a hole in my rug, Julian." "I have a meeting," he said, frustration leaking into his voice. "Now I have a project that's going to fall apart if I don't send these approvals." "The mountain doesn't care about your approvals," Sierra said calmly, not looking up from her work. "You might as well sit down and learn to be still. It's a skill, you know." "I don't know how to be still," he admitted, dropping onto the sofa. "If I'm not moving, I feel like I'm falling behind." "Falling behind what?" Sierra asked, finally meeting his eyes. "The rat race? Out here, if you move too fast, you miss the important things, or you drive your car off a cliff." Julian winced, point taken. Later that afternoon, he insisted on helping. He couldn't just sit there while she hauled wood and fed the animals in the barn. She gave him a pair of old work gloves and a coat that belonged to her late father. It was too big in the shoulders, but it was warm. In the barn, the air was thick with the scent of hay and horses. Sierra moved among the animals with a tenderness that surprised him. She spoke to them in low, soothing tones, checking their hooves, filling their troughs. Julian was assigned the task of breaking ice in the water buckets. It was hard work. His hands blistered inside the gloves. His back ached. But there was a satisfaction in it that he hadn't expected. When he cracked the ice and the water flowed clear, the horses drank immediately. It was a tangible, immediate result. In architecture, he worked on projects that took years to finish. Here, the reward was instant. "You're not terrible at that," Sierra noted, leaning against a stall door, watching him. Praised Julian grinned, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Maybe I have a future in ice management." She chuckled, a genuine sound this time. It softened her face, making her look younger, less guarded. "Don't quit your day job yet, architect." That evening, the dynamic shifted. The initial tension of rescuer and victim began to dissolve into something else. They sat by the fire, the oil lamps casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Sierra had opened a bottle of wine. "So," Julian started, swirling the dark liquid in his glass. "Why are you out here alone?" "It's a lot of work for one person." Sierra looked into the fire. "It wasn't always just me. My dad passed 3 years ago. My brother. He moved to Denver, wanted the city life, like you, and you didn't." "No," she said firmly. This land, it's in my blood. My grandfather homesteaded this valley. If I leave, they'll sell it. Developers will come in, chop it up into quarter-acre lots, build luxury cabins that sit empty for 11 months of the year. She paused, looking at him. No offense. None taken, Julian said softly. That's exactly what I do. That's why I was here. I figured, she said. I saw the blueprints in your bag when I was drying your stuff. There was a silence, but it wasn't hostile. It was heavy with unsaid things. I build things because I want to create spaces where people feel safe, Julian said, almost defending himself. Where they can have a home. You don't build a home with blueprints, Julian, Sierra said, her voice quiet. You build a home with time, with memories, with sweat. She stood up to add a log to the fire. As she moved back, she tripped over the edge of the rug. Julian shot his hand out, catching her arm to steady her. They froze. She was close. Very close. The firelight flickered in her eyes, turning the flint into gold. He could smell the soap she used, clean and simple. His hand lingered on her arm, could feel the warmth of her skin through the flannel. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Julian's heart hammered against his ribs. He saw her gaze drop to his lips, then dart back up to his eyes. She looked terrified, not of him, but of the moment. Sierra, he whispered. She pulled back, gently but firmly. It's late, she said, her voice breathless. We should get some sleep. The plow might come tomorrow. She retreated to her bedroom, closing the door. Julian sat by the fire for a long time, listening to the wind die down, wishing the storm would last just one more day. The plow came the next morning. A monstrous yellow machine roaring down the road, clearing the path to civilization. Behind it came the sheriff's cruiser. The bubble had burst. Julian packed his bag in silence. The mood in the cabin was somber. Sierra was busy in the kitchen, aggressively scrubbing a pan that was already clean. The sheriff can give you a ride into town, she said, her back to him. There's a rental agency there. You can get a car to Denver. Right, Julian said. He stood in the doorway, his coat on, his bag over his shoulder. He felt a physical ache in his chest, a heaviness he hadn't expected. Sierra, she turned around. Her face was composed, the walls back up high and thick. Yeah. Thank you for everything. I don't know what I would have done. You would have froze, she said bluntly. You're welcome. He took a step toward her. Look, about last night, about us. ... There is no us. Julian, she interrupted, crossing her arms. You belong in the city. You have towers to build. I belong here, fixing fences and chasing cows. We're different species. Are we? He asked, because it didn't feel that way when we were talking by the fire. That was the storm talking, she said, looking away. Go on, sheriff's waiting. He wanted to argue. He wanted to drop his bag and tell her he didn't care about the towers. But the logic of his old life was creeping back in. He had investors. He had a career. He had a life he had spent 15 years building. He couldn't just throw it away for a woman he met 3 days ago. Could he? Goodbye, Sierra, he said. Bye, city boy, she whispered. He walked out the door. The sun was blindingly bright on the fresh snow, got into the sheriff's cruiser and didn't look back, because he knew if he saw her standing in the doorway, he wouldn't be able to leave. Chicago was loud. That was the first thing Julian noticed. It was an assault on the senses. These sirens, horns, the constant hum of traffic, the chatter of people on phones. It was a gray, slushy mess. He went back to work immediately. He walked into his glass-walled office, sat in his ergonomic chair, and looked at the 3 monitors on his desk. He had missed the big meeting, but his team had covered for him. The investors were happy. The Ecolodge project was a go. He should have been ecstatic. This was the biggest contract of his career. But as he looked at the rendering's beautiful, sleek, modern cabins dotting a pristine mountainside, he felt a wave of nausea. He saw what Sierra had said. Luxury cabins that sit empty. He wasn't building homes. He was building commodities. It was scarring the landscape she loved. Weeks passed. He went on dates with sophisticated women who talked about art galleries and summering in the Hamptons. He nodded and smiled, but his mind was always drifting. He was thinking about the way the light hit the peaks at sunset. He was thinking about the smell of sagebrush. He was thinking about Sierra's laugh when he broke the ice. He felt hollow. The success he had chased for so long tasted like ash. One night, sitting in his penthouse overlooking the skyline, he poured a glass of wine. It was an expensive vintage, far better than what Sierra had at the ranch, but it tasted thin. He pulled out his phone and opened the photos he had taken before the crash. There was one he had taken accidentally, a blurry shot of the mountains. He zoomed in. It wasn't the view he missed. It was the feeling of being grounded, of being necessary. He realized he hadn't just left a woman in Colorado. He had left himself. The man he wanted to be wasn't the guy in the suit. It was the guy in the oversized coat, breaking ice for horses. He stood up, the glass of wine forgotten on the table. He walked to his closet and pulled out a duffel bag. He didn't pack his suits. He packed jeans, flannels, and he picked up the phone. "This is Julian," he said to his partner when he answered. "I'm out. Buy me out. Done." The drive up the mountain was different this time. It was spring. The snow had melted from the lower elevations, revealing lush green valleys and wildflowers bursting with color. The road was dry. Julian drove a pickup truck this time, a sturdy used Ford he had bought in Denver. He knew the way by heart, even though he had only traveled it once in a blizzard. He turned onto the gravel road leading to the Double R. His heart was hammering in his throat, louder than the engine. What if she wasn't there? What if she told him to leave? What if he was crazy? He pulled up to the ranch house. It looked the same, anchored and timeless. He stepped out of the truck. The air was sweet and clean. He heard a hammer striking wood, walked around the side of the barn. Sierra was there. She was fixing a section of the corral fence, struggling to hold a heavy rail in place while she nailed it. She was sweating, her hat pushed back, a look of fierce concentration on her face. Julian walked up silently, reached out and grabbed the other end of the rail, lifting it effortlessly into place. Sierra gasped, dropping her hammer. She spun around, her eyes going wide. She looked at him, then at the rail, then back at him. "You're holding it wrong," he said, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Structurally speaking, Julian," she breathed, as if she was seeing a ghost. "What are you doing here? Did you get lost again?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "I'm not lost. For the first time in my life, I know exactly where I am. But your job, your towers?" "I quit," he said simply. "I don't want to build towers, Sierra. I want to build a home. I don't want to do it without you." She stared at him, searching his face for any sign of a joke. She saw only sincerity and a raw, vulnerable hope. The toughness melted out of her posture. Tears welled up in her flint-colored eyes. "You idiot," she choked out, a laugh bubbling up through the tears. "You city idiot." "I know," he said, stepping closer. "I've got a lot to learn. Will you teach me?" She didn't answer with words. She closed the distance between them, throwing her arms around his neck. He caught her, burying his face in her hair, smelling the sage in the sun. When they kissed, it felt like the storm had finally broken, leaving only clear skies and a horizon that went on forever. "You're late," she whispered against his lips. "I got here as fast as I could," he replied. And as the sun dipped behind the Rockies, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold, Julian knew he was finally home.